Reddit, what are your worst roommate stories? Probably the girl who dated the homeless drug dealer. He ended up moving in, without my permission, and started dealing out of our apartment. Definitely without my permission. He also had the rankest boots I've ever smelled that he would leave in the living room. I had a roommate in college who could only fall asleep if he watched Disney movies at night. I had to listen to them every night 4 hours trying to sleep. And I now hate The Lion King with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. Circa 2001. It was my first apartment and I wasn't a good judge of roommate character back then. I was working at a welding shop and had befriended this big Mexican guy after driving him home from work enough to start hanging out at his house after work for a few beers and his mom's excellent biscuits and gravy she'd make for us. Naturally, we thought it would be a good idea to roommate at my place to cut down on expense. Little did I know, he was one of those drinkers that black out and destroy everything. Each day after work was him with a case of beer and getting in arguments with kids in Yahoo chat rooms over a mic until he would pass out. It escalated. He quit going to work and I'd come home with him passed out. Vomit all over the floors. Piss in the corners. Half-eaten pizza face down on the couch. The works. I started telling him he needed to leave but he wasn't hearing it. Eventually he got arrested for something and ended up in jail. I was free. For a while. He got out and I woke to banging on my door. I didn't let him in. His mom collected all his things when he got locked up. Fast forward to recently. I'd been overseas for 6 years and moved back to my home state afterward. And recently stumbled across his Facebook page after not having seen or heard from him in 13 years. We talked. He's doing really well now. Training to be an addiction counselor, and I'm happy for him. This is actually about my friend's roommate, but that's hardly important. My friend's roommate comes stumbling into their dorm room, freshman year. It's blatantly obvious that she is drunk beyond reason. She starts shouting, "I need to go to the bathroom," which wakes up my friend. She sees her roommate just staggering back and forth through the doorway. She stayed in bed because she really didn't know how to react. Her roommate returns through the door once more and reiterates that she needs to go to the bathroom. Before her roommate had left to go to a party, she had placed her white Mac laptop on her chair by her desk. The rationale here is that we believe the white from the laptop on the seat made the chair look like a porcelain load thrown in the mind of her drunken roommate. So she approaches the chair, pulls down her pants, and sits on her laptop. My friend braces herself because this situation can only go one way. As she braced for impact, her roommate releases a sigh of relief that unfortunately is synchronized with the release of her bladder and bowels. Despite her laptop being covered in piss and it, her roommate denies that this ever happened. TLDR roommate drunkenly covers laptop in piss and it. I had to work abroad for 3 months. I came home to discover the bathroom light bulb had blown just after I left. Roomie felt she couldn't change it herself so called an electrician. Electrician laughed at her and told her she could save a fortune and do it herself. She still hadn't done it by the time I got back. Needless to say I fixed it in about 5 minutes. It would have been sooner but I couldn't stop chuckling at the thought of her rotting in the dark for months. I had a roommate who would attempt to leave and justified scathing, passive aggressive notes for just everyone. Our apartment neighbors, cars parked outside, and even our landlady. The kind of notes with overly polite language, underlines, and randomly capitalized words. Always written in red marker. Always rude enough to get the it beaten out of her. Always signed from both of us. I spent that year following her around and removing the notes as quickly and quietly as possible. I lived with a magician. Of the many moments, the odd one that I remember vividly was when he was about to leave the country for near about 2 months. Before he left, hours before going the airport, he filled the freezer with whole chickens. Then got really upset when we ate them to free up space. Oh, actually my story, but a friend of mine had a pretty rough time on her first week of living in a new place with a bunch of guys. She originally wanted to rent with her friend, but unfortunately her friend pulled out of the university course at the local university they were attending together. So she ended up having to find somewhere to rent alone. She ended up renting a room in a house share with 4 other guys, also students. After the first week she informed them she was going to the shop and they asked her to pick up some toilet tissue for the house. Unfortunately she forgot and they were pretty upset about it. So the next day, after being out of the house all day, she came home to find her bedroom walls and bedsheet smeared in it. It was their idea of teaching her a lesson about forgetting to get toilet tissue. I made the mistake of living with friends, and it all went to it. They were all slobs and I got really tired of cleaning up after them. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the worst of it was my one friend's boyfriend. You see, she had previously been in a bad relationship, and all of us promised we would say if we thought she was in another bad one. Did that work? Lol, no. Everyone hated her new boyfriend, but I was the only one that flat out told her she was being used and she should get out. I became enemy number one, as suddenly everyone else was so supportive of her relationship. They plotted ways to get back at me. I actually overheard them saying what they were going to do around the apartment to piss me off. Joke's on her. They're divorced now, and one of the others in a spiraling to hell relationship. The one I remained friends with, she didn't plot, she was just a slob, is still contently married. I did get a half-hearted apology one time, but it was cut off when I said I wasn't sorry for anything. My old roommate always used the same pan for eggs and never cleaned it. For an entire year this pan was caked with eggs and just sat on the stove, which was also covered in egg splatter. Even if I cleaned it for him, it would be back on the stove the next day. My first roommate at college was a girl who had some severe issues. She was bulimic and would cut herself. She never talked to me, and I only deduced these things by finding the bloody tissues under her bed, and having just lived with my brother who was suicidal and self-harmed a lot, and also following the trail of vomit smell to the closet where she apparently kept it. Duck if I know why, since we had a suite and our own attached bathroom. She would also bring up containers of food to leave out to make it look like she was eating. When I talked to the RA about this and they forced her to speak with a therapist, she threatened to smother me in my sleep, and I was told it was in my best interest to move out. My first year at college was not fun. So I lived in a dorm room with two other guys. There was one bunk bed and one single. I slept in the single and the other two at the bunk bed. We'll call Larry the guy on the bottom bunk and Eric the guy on the top. It was Saturday night and we all came back drunk from parties at different times. So it's about 2 to 3 AM and we are all in bed. All of a sudden I begin to hear this faint moaning. I pick my head up and see Larry laughing his ass off but trying to stay quiet. Up above him is Eric, who apparently is watching porn on his phone, out loud and beating one out. Their bed was shaking. One of the most awkward experiences. The worst part was that this was the first of 3 times that this happened. We never confronted him. Edit. I've known Eric for most of my life also. Got a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue for my birthday from a friend. I went out of town. Roommate proceeds to drink half the bottle and then fill it up with water like I wouldn't notice. And then had the audacity to lie about it and continues to till this day. I do believe he doesn't remember though. He got laid off after getting a DUI. Proceeded to drink himself stupid for 8 months and was eventually taking our rent money to pay his car bill. Didn't realize till we had an eviction notice. Forced him to get his parents to pay for our 3 months of rent he didn't pay, but I still have an eviction on my record. I have a copy of the notice that says I was not evicted, so wherever I go I have to show that to future landlords or when I buy a house so we don't get denied. The worst story I have is just really creepy. She was a great roommate but I couldn't sleep right for a month after. So it's literally the first night we are sleeping in the same room. So things are already a little awkward since we only know each other's names. But night falls and we go to sleep. I wake up to the sound of her yelling no 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 Nuuru, and then she flings all of her blankets off of her bed and onto the floor. At this point I'm freaked out, so I ask if she's okay and she doesn't reply. Instead she sits up and looks around. Sees the window and kind of whispers not the window. Then she stands up and walks to the window. At this point I realize she must be sleepwalking. Or crazy. She gets to the window, grabs the lock with both hands and is locking and unlocking the window over and over again while whispering to herself. She never opened it, but after about 3 minutes of that she lets go and says that'll do, and then starts walking back to her bed. But when she was passing by my bed she stopped and turned to face me. Then she just stood there asleep, I hope, staring at me for a good 2 minutes. Then she started whispering to herself again, walked past her bed to the door, dragged her hand down the middle of it, turned around and walked to her bed and went back to sleep. I was terrified, but I never told her about it. She never did it again. Edit. Spelling. Edit 2. My first gilding. Thank you, kind stranger. Ah cute, oh ah cute. She called an ambulance on our other roommate in the middle of the night because she thought our roommate was cutting. Her evidence: there were red spots on a towel. What actually happened? Our roommate dyed her hair red, which she showed off the day before to everyone. She didn't even tell anyone what she found. She just assumed the worst and called the authorities. My freshman year, I had a crazy roommate. He was a bigger guy with a mustache who thought all the women around him desired him. He tried very hard to make people like him, and failed miserably. He also had some itty roommate habits. For example, he would set multiple alarms in the morning and not wake up when they went off, which forced me to get up and wake him up every time. It was a college dorm where we slept in the same room. He would also drive like 80 miles per hour on residential roads to try and impress people. Anyway, after 4 weeks of creeping everyone out in the hall and alienating himself, someone took his iPad as a joke. He freaked out and threatened multiple people, saying he would hack their computers and destroy their lives. Eventually someone told him his iPad was in one of my friend's rooms. He went inside, grabbed the guy, put a knife to his throat, and asked him where the iPad was. The cops came and he was expelled. But after that I didn't have to share my room the rest of the year, so that was cool. Honestly, I think I was the worst roommate. I went through a pretty bad slut phase, and would really just sleep with any girl that was at least a 5. Come back to the dorm around 3 in the morning typically to have a sex, and my roommate would always be there. He left after about 3 weeks. We were both slobs, so that wasn't a problem at all. I did have a problem with him using my computer for cybersex and other garbage nearly all the time. It was 2004/2005. He also used some of my toiletries, deodorant, shampoo, body wash, which is just wrong. We had a falling out over something completely stupid, and when he moved his stuff, he took the couch. We didn't buy it. Someone else was moving out 2 doors down and gave it to us. I came home one day after work, saw the couch was gone, and said, "Ha, he took the couch. That sucks." From there on out, I never had another roommate again. I had a roommate who absolutely refused to buy toilet paper after weeks of her stealing ours. The other 3 of us started hiding it so she would be forced to buy her own. Instead, she started taking heaps of napkins from restaurants and stealing rolls of our paper towels. One night we all went out to dinner, came home, and the entire basement was flooded because she backed up the toilet with God only knows how much that shouldn't ever be flushed. That, and she would keep piles of old food laying around her room. Never did laundry. Most disgusting human being I've ever met. About 2 years ago I woke up in the middle of the night to find my roommate trying to jerk off. I guess it wasn't his fault the cock he was trying to jerk off was attached to me. A straight 24-year-old guy who moved in just a month ago. My first roommate in college was a nightmare. She'd party all night and then wake me up at 4 AM when she got in to see if she got any phone calls. This was before cell phones were common, but our college phones had voicemail. It was a dry campus, and she would drink all the time in the dorm and leave bottles and cans all over the place. I drank too, but I at least had the common sense to hide the bottles. She'd come back from sorority parties trashed off her ass and expected me to take care of her. It came to a head when I went back home for the weekend, and when I got back she had put a leaky McDonald's cup on my brand new laptop. Who knows how long it had been sitting there. I told her I was going down to the student life office to see about getting my own dorm. It was worth the extra fee to live alone. Luckily there was an empty dorm on the same floor I had been on and was able to move there. I went back to my dorm to start packing up, and the cunt had already moved all of my stuff out into the hallway. I hadn't even told her I was able to move out yet. Turns out she wasn't cut out for college. Anyway, she dropped out after 1 year. My roommate turned out to be one of the best, most patient people I know, and I learned a lot from him in terms of just being a good person. It's a terrible story since that's not particularly exciting,